No successor could claim the alien crown until it chose the shackled human. The crown rejected its seventh candidate in a spray of violet light. Lord Tessic collapsed, convulsing, his bronze skin darkening where the artifact touched him. Guards dragged him away as whispers filled the throne room. Tobias Grant watched from the wall, iron manacles biting his wrists, calculating the voltage required to drop a 200-pound alien. 3 months of slavery had taught him to notice details. The crown floated above the empty obsidian throne, interlocking metals moving like liquid, pulsing with bioluminescent veins. Whatever powered it wasn't from Earth's periodic table. Next candidate, High Counselor Vorian Tesh announced, his slate-gray skin bearing ritual scars of office. A young noblewoman stepped forward. She lasted 11 seconds before the crown sent her sprawling. Tobias felt the prod against his back. "Move, human." Brecken, the palace steward who'd purchased him, gestured toward the throne. "This is a mistake," Tobias said. "Perhaps walk anyway." The crowd parted as Tobias moved forward, chains clinking. Hundreds of eyes tracked him, amber, silver, black, in faces ranging from humanoid to insectoid. What they shared was contempt. Commander Ashara Kell stood beside the throne, violet eyes narrowing in a face that would have been beautiful if it wasn't promising violence. Her obsidian armor emphasized both protection and the powerful body beneath. Purple hair fell past her shoulders, bound back from pointed ears. "Kneel," Vorian commanded. Tobias's knees hit marble. The crown descended, and instead of pain, warmth spread across his scalp, sinking through bone. Information flooded his mind. Star charts, languages, the entire Zorathian dynasty downloading into his consciousness. He gasped, hands gripping the crown's edge. The metal felt alive, matching his heartbeat. Light exploded outward. When it faded, the crown sat firmly on Tobias's head, pulsing with his breathing. The throne room erupted. Ashara moved first, her hand going to the plasma blade at her hip as she stepped between Tobias and the surging crowd. "Stand down." The authority froze half the room. Vorian's face had gone pale. "The Empire will never accept. The Empire will accept what I tell them to accept. I'm Emperor, remember?" "You've been Emperor for less than a day." "Longest day of my life." Ashara cupped his face, her expression softening into something tender. "You're absolutely insane." "Probably, but I'm your kind of insane." She kissed him then, soft and slow, and it felt like sealing a pact. When they broke apart, the sun had fully risen, gilding the city in gold light. "There's going to be so much work," Ashara said, "reforming the government, rebuilding trust, managing the colonies. We'll handle it. Assassination attempts. You'll keep me alive. Political scandals. We'll weather them." She smiled against his lips. "You know what you're signing up for?" "Not even a little bit, but I'm learning." They stayed like that as the Empire woke around them, a human emperor and his alien commander, chosen by an ancient crown facing an uncertain future. It wasn't the story either would have written, but it was theirs, and they would make it work. Because the crown had seen something in both of them, not perfection, but potential. Not what they were, but what they could become together. 3 months later, Tobias stood before the assembled empire, Ashara at his side wearing the circlet that marked her as empress. The reforms had begun: tax restructuring, military conscription revision, technology investment. It was messy work, and half the empire still questioned his legitimacy. But the other half was thriving. Colonial worlds reported increased satisfaction, human refugees had been granted citizenship, and the economy showed signs of recovery. Change was happening. "Ready?" Ashara asked, her hand finding his. Tobias looked at the woman who'd enslaved him and become his partner, his equal, his love. The crown pulsed contentedly on his head, satisfied with its choice. "With you always." They stepped forward to address their empire, and the crown blazed with light that promised a new era. Not the age of tradition and stagnation that had come before, but something unprecedented. The age of the human emperor and his alien empress, who had learned that sometimes the greatest strength came from the most unexpected sources. The crown had known. It always had. "End crown has chosen," Ashara continued, blade drawn. "By ancient law, he is emperor." "He's human," a nobleman spat. He is chosen on your feet, Your Majesty. 4 months ago, Tobias had been designing climate control systems. Then raiders hit the research station, and he woke in a cage. Now he was emperor of an alien civilization that wanted him dead. He stood. The crown settled, bringing awareness he hadn't possessed before. He could feel the throne, sense power conduits through walls, taste fear and rage in the air. Ashara moved close enough that he could smell cinnamon and gun oil. She placed her blade against the iron, and metal parted. "You have enemies in this room," she said quietly. "Most of them. Don't trust anyone." "Including you?" "Especially me." The blade hummed through the second manacle. The crown fed him information about the woman inches away. Commander Ashara Kell, youngest elite guard promotion, 32 confirmed kills, decorated 7 times, unmarried, loyal to the throne. "Your Majesty," Vorian had recovered composure, though his voice strained. "This is unprecedented." Dangerous ground. He knew it from how Ashara's posture shifted, ready to intercept attacks. But the crown fed him confidence. "The High Council must convene," Vorian said stiffly. "There are protocols. I can do whatever the crown allows. That's how this works, isn't it?" Ashara made a sound that might have been suppressed laughter. "Commander Kell," Vorian said, "escort His Majesty to the Imperial Chambers. The High Council meets at sunset." They needed time to plan his assassination. Ashara inclined her head, conveying both respect and insubordination. "As you command." Her hand settled on Tobias's elbow. "This way, Your Majesty." The Imperial Chambers occupied the palace's highest tower. Ashara stood beside him during the gravity lift ascent. She hadn't released his arm. "You handled that poorly," she said. "Vorian will use your words as evidence of instability. They'll argue for your removal by sunset." "Can they do that?" "Not while the crown remains bonded, but they can make assassination look like an accident." The lift opened. Ashara moved ahead, scanning for threats. "First week, 3, maybe 4. After that, depends on how competent you prove." "And if I'm not?" She glanced back, expression softening fractionally. "Then you'll be dead by morning, and the Empire falls into civil war." The Imperial Chambers were obscene, 30-foot ceilings, color-shifting walls, furniture that looked grown rather than built. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the capital sprawling below. Tobias walked to the window. Somewhere down there, other humans lived as slaves. His crew had been scattered. Were they still alive? "The crown will answer your questions," Ashara said, "if you know how to listen." He turned. She'd removed her helmet, striking features now visible. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, eyes promising violence and something unnamed. She began unfastening armor with practiced efficiency. "What are you doing?" "I'm your personal guard. I stay within 20 feet at all times. If you die, I'm executed. So it's in both our interests you survive." "Romantic." Her mouth twitched. "You're not my type, too soft." "I spent 3 months in a labor camp." "Still too soft." She was testing reactions. Tobias crossed his arms. "The crown chose me for a reason. Any theories?" Ashara's expression shuddered. "The crown's logic is beyond mortal understanding." "That's the official line. What do you actually think?" She met his eyes. Neither spoke for a long moment. "I think the Empire is dying," she said slowly. "We've been without proper leadership for 60 years. The High Council is corrupt, the military stretched thin, colonies on the verge of rebellion. Maybe the crown decided we needed something none of us expected. An outsider, someone not bound by our traditions." Tobias absorbed that. The crown pulsed, feeding him information, economic data, military deployments, classified reports. The picture wasn't pretty. Ashara's hand went to her blade. "The crown shows me patterns, gaps in data, resources being redirected, communications encrypted above standard protocols. They're preparing for a transition that doesn't include me. A coup, or they're planning to destroy the crown itself." Ashara's face went white. That's impossible. The crown has survived 3,000 years. Everything's destructible with the right tools. She crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping his shoulders hard. If you're right, if they're even attempting this, it means civil war. The military will fracture, colonies will break away, millions will die. The crown is the only thing holding the empire together. Her face was inches from his. He could see gold flecks in violet eyes, smell cinnamon stronger, feel heat radiating from her. The crown pulsed harder, and suddenly Tobias sensed her emotions: fear, rage, and underneath, something fierce and hungry. Then we stopped them, he said. We? You said it yourself. If I die, you're executed. That makes us allies. Allies, she repeated, voice dropping. Her grip loosened but didn't release. Is that what you think we are? What else would we be? Ashara's eyes searched his face. Whatever she saw made her step back abruptly. Get some rest. I'll post guards outside and sweep for surveillance. Don't leave this chamber. Don't trust anyone. You think Brecken's involved? I think everyone's involved until proven otherwise. She turned toward the exit. Tobias watched the tension in her shoulders. Ashara. She stopped but didn't turn. Thank you for earlier. In the throne room. I was doing my duty. You drew your blade before the crown finished bonding. You didn't know if it would accept me, but you defended me anyway. Now she looked back, expression unreadable. The crown doesn't make mistakes. I knew it would choose you. The door closed and Tobias was alone with a statement that made no sense. How could she have known? He sat on the bed, closing his eyes. When he concentrated, information flowed. Palace schematics, council member dossiers, military assessments. And there, buried in encrypted files his engineering background helped him parse, he found it. Communications between Ashara and an unknown contact, dating back 4 months. Surveillance reports on a human research station. Coordinates matching the attack on his facility. The crown fed him more, and the picture crystallized. Ashara hadn't just known the crown would choose him. She'd orchestrated his capture, brought him here deliberately. She'd used him, manipulated him, while those violet eyes promised loyalty. Tobias lay back, exhaustion overwhelming adrenaline. Outside, the alien sun set in amber and violet, and somewhere below, people planned his death. The assassination attempt came at midnight. The crown jolted him awake. Danger, close, multiple threats. He rolled from bed as the window exploded. 3 figures in black tactical gear dropped through, plasma rifles tracking. Tobias dove behind a marble column as energy bolts scorched the air. The door burst open. Ashara came through low and fast, her blade singing as it cut through the first assassin's weapon. She moved like violence made flesh, every strike precise. The second assassin turned toward her, and Tobias saw the opening, a ceremonial statue within reach. He grabbed it and threw. The statue caught the assassin in the temple. The third fled toward the window. Ashara's blade took him between the shoulder blades. Silence fell, broken only by breathing. Ashara stood among the bodies, chest heaving, armor splattered with dark blood. Her eyes found Tobias. "You're not injured?" "No," he stepped out, heart racing. "You got here fast." "I was outside your door. You said you'd post guards." Ashara moved through the room, checking bodies, securing weapons. "These are High Council enforcers," she said. "Vorian's making his move early." "How early?" "The council meeting is in 6 hours. If you died tonight, they could have blamed anti-human extremists and seized control." Tobias's hands shook. He'd killed someone. The weight was beginning to register. Ashara crossed to him. "First kill? Does it show? You're breathing too fast and you're about 30 seconds from vomiting, so yes." She caught his chin, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You did well. He would have killed you, then me. Remember that when the guilt comes." Her thumb brushed his jawline, and even through shock, Tobias registered the intimacy. This close, he could see scars on her face, the way her pupils expanded. The crown pulsed, and suddenly he felt her emotions. Pride, relief, and underneath something fierce and possessive. "We need to move," she said, not releasing him. "If Vorian sent 1 team, he'll send more." "Military district. I have loyal soldiers who'll defend you." She finally released his chin, stepping back to gather equipment. Tobias watched her, and the crown fed him more information. And there, buried in encrypted files, more evidence of her surveillance. Months of it. You knew, he said. Froze. Knew what? That the crown would choose me. You said so earlier. But it's more than that. You arranged for my capture. She turned slowly. Who told you that? The crown. It's been feeding me information, including your communications with whoever you hired to raid my station. Silence stretched. Ashara's hand drifted toward her blade, then stopped. She closed her eyes briefly. When they opened, something fundamental had shifted. Yes, she said simply. I orchestrated your capture. I brought you here deliberately. Why? Because the crown showed me. 6 months ago, it began sending visions during meditation. A human man with eyes that saw patterns where others saw chaos. It showed me the empire burning, civil war consuming everything. And then it showed me you standing before the throne. It showed me the only future where the empire survives. Tobias felt like the floor had dropped. So you had my station attacked, had my colleagues killed or enslaved, dragged me across space in chains because of a vision? Yes. The admission was flat, unrepentant. I made a choice, sacrifice one research team or watch billions die. I'd make the same choice again. That's not your decision to make. Someone had to make it. The crown chose me to be its messenger. I delivered. Tobias wanted to be angry. But the crown was showing him more. The visions Ashara had experienced, the terrible weight she'd carried alone, the gamble she'd taken with her own life. Did you know what would happen, he asked. That you'd be assigned as my guard? That we'd... He stopped, unsure how to finish. Ashara's expression softened fractionally. No. The crown showed me you would be emperor. It didn't show me the rest. The rest being? She crossed the space in 2 strides, her hand finding his hair, tilting his head back. Her face hovered inches from his, violet eyes blazing. This, she breathed, whatever this is between us, the crown didn't warn me about this. Is it real or just the bond? I don't know, she admitted, but I felt it the moment you stood in that throne room, before the bond fully formed. I looked at you in chains and felt something break open in my chest. Her thumb traced his lower lip. I used you, she continued, voice raw. I manipulated events to bring you here. I don't get to want you too. Nothing about this is fair. No, she agreed, but we don't have time for fair. We have assassins coming and a coup to stop, so whatever this is, it has to wait. She released him and stepped back. The crown pulsed harder and he sensed her emotions roiling, desire, guilt, fear, determination. Get dressed, she ordered. We move in 5 minutes. Explosions echoed from below. They're hitting the lower levels, multiple teams. This isn't just about killing you anymore. What is it about? She met his eyes? They're going for the crown itself. Vorian's launching his coup tonight. They moved through the palace like ghosts, Ashara leading him down maintenance corridors and service lifts unlisted on maps. She'd found him tactical gear that almost fit, and the crown had downloaded hand-to-hand combat training directly into his muscle memory. Stay behind me, Ashara ordered. She glanced back. That's not bravery, that's stupidity. Maybe, but I'm not letting you die protecting me. They stared at each other, and despite everything, Tobias saw her lips curve. You're going to be a terrible emperor. Probably. Plasma fire erupted ahead. They pressed against the wall as council enforcers rushed past. Ashara counted under her breath, timing their movement. When she moved, Tobias followed, slipping into a side passage unseen. The throne room is 3 levels down, she said. If Vorian wants the crown, that's where he'll make his stand. They descended through emergency stairs. Fighting grew louder. Ashara navigated it all with lethal precision. Tobias tried not to think about the bodies. The crown fed him tactical information, troop movements, strategic positions, weak points, and he relayed it to Ashara. You're seeing through the palace security grid, she realized. The crown's connected to infrastructure. I can access cameras, lock doors, even reroute power. Then do it, seal the throne room, keep Vorian's forces out until my unit arrives. Tobias closed his eyes. letting the crown guide him deeper into palace systems. It felt like slipping into a second skin, his engineering knowledge merging with ancient technology. He found the throne room's security protocols and activated full lockdown. Done. Nothing's getting through those doors without explosives. Good. An explosion rocked the corridor ahead. Ashara grabbed him, pulling back as the ceiling collapsed. When dust cleared, their path was blocked by rubble. Alternate route, she said, already moving. They ran through twisting passages. Tobias realized she was leading them deeper into the palace's lower levels. The corridors here were older, carved from raw stone, lit by bioluminescent growths. Where are we going? The old armory. There's a passage connecting to the throne room's foundation. They descended another level and Ashara suddenly stopped, body rigid. What is it? Someone's following us. Multiple someones. She turned, blade ready. Stay close. The attack came from both directions. Enforcers poured from doorways, elite troops wearing armor matching Ashara's in quality. Royal Guard, she hissed. Vorian bought off the Emperor's personal protection. She launched herself at the nearest group, and Tobias had no choice but to follow. The combat training kicked in, and he found himself moving with borrowed skill. Blocking, striking, using momentum against opponents. It wasn't elegant, but it kept him alive. Ashara fought like a force of nature, but there were too many, and they were being pushed back toward a dead end. Tobias's back hit stone. An enforcer lunged, and he barely deflected the blade. The crown pulsed frantically, feeding him information faster than he could process. The palace infrastructure, the power conduits in walls, the energy grid powering everything. An idea sparked. Ashara, get down! She dropped without hesitation. Tobias reached out through the crown, finding the power junction in the ceiling, and overloaded it. Electrical discharge filled the corridor, arcing between metal armor and stone walls. The enforcers convulsed before collapsing. Ashara rose slowly, staring at the bodies, then at Tobias. That wasn't in any combat training. Engineering degree. She crossed to him, checking for injuries. When satisfied he was intact, she didn't step back. Her fingers lingered on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. You saved my life, she said quietly. You've saved mine twice tonight. I'm keeping score. This isn't a game. No, he agreed. The corridor suddenly felt smaller. Ashara's hand slid up to his neck, thumb finding his pulse. Her eyes were dark, pupils blown wide. We should keep moving, she said, making no effort to move. Probably. Tobias kissed her. Or she kissed him. Later, he wouldn't be able to say who moved first, only that suddenly her mouth was on his and her body was pressed against him and everything else ceased to matter. She tasted like violence and cinnamon, and her hands were in his hair, pulling him closer. The crown pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats, and Tobias felt her emotions crash over him. Desire, desperation, guilt, need. He kissed her harder, one hand fisting in her purple hair, the other finding her waist. Ashara made a sound low in her throat, breaking the kiss to press her forehead against his. They were both breathing hard, and her hands trembled where they gripped his shoulders. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. Worst timing ever. You should hate me for what I did. I should. He pulled back to meet her eyes, but I don't. The crown keeps showing me what you saw, the weight you carried. You made an impossible choice. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes you human, or whatever the alien equivalent is. She laughed, a broken sound. We're in the middle of a coup. People are dying upstairs. And I'm down here kissing the man I enslaved because I couldn't stop thinking about you. From the moment I saw you in those visions, I couldn't stop. It was supposed to be simple. Bring you here, let the crown choose, fade into the background. But then you looked at me in that throne room, and I knew I was in trouble. Tobias cupped her face, feeling the heat of her skin. We can figure this out after, when we're not actively being murdered. If we survive. When we survive. She kissed him again, briefer but no less intense. When she pulled back, the warrior mask was back. The throne room, she said. We finish this first. Then what? Then we figure out if an emperor and his treasonous commander can actually make this work. They moved through the old armory and found the passage. It was narrow, carved through bedrock, sloping upward. Tobias accessed security feeds through the crown. My unit reached the throne room, he reported. They're holding position outside, Vorian's inside with about 30 enforcers. And the crown? Still on lockdown, but he's got some kind of device. Understanding hit him. It's a resonance disruptor. He's going to shatter the crown from the inside out. Ashara's pace increased to a run. How long? Maybe 20 minutes. The crown's ancient. Even a disruptor will take time. They burst into a chamber beneath the throne room. Above them, the floor was transparent composite, and they could see Vorian standing before the throne. The device in his hands pulsed with sickly green light aimed at the crown. There, Ashara pointed to a maintenance ladder. We can come up behind him. They climbed in silence. Tobias felt the crown's pain through their bond. The disruptor was working, slowly unmaking 3,000 years of craftsmanship. When it broke, the Empire would fracture. They emerged in a side alcove, hidden by decorative screens. The throne room's main doors were sealed, and Lieutenant Saren's forces hammered against them. Vorian's enforcers had formed a defensive perimeter, attention focused outward. We go for Vorian, Ashara whispered. You disable the disruptor, I'll handle his guards. There are 30 of them. I'm aware. That's suicide. She looked at him, smile all edges. Then you better work fast. Before he could argue, she moved. Ashara's blade cut through the first enforcer, and then she was among them like a whirlwind. Plasma bolts filled the air, and Tobias had no choice but to run for Vorian. The High Counselor saw him coming and drew a pistol. Tobias dove as energy seared past his head, rolling to his feet and closing distance. He caught Vorian's wrist, twisting hard, and the pistol clattered away. You're destroying everything, Tobias growled, driving his knee into the alien's stomach. Vorian staggered, but didn't fall. His free hand found a blade, and suddenly Tobias was on the defensive. They grappled, and Tobias could hear Ashara fighting behind him. The Empire doesn't need a crown, Vorian spat, his blade scoring Tobias's ribs. It needs strength, not some human pet. Tobias caught the blade hand, squeezing until bones cracked. Vorian screamed, and Tobias shoved him backward into the disruptor. The device toppled, its beam cutting out. The crown's pain receded immediately. Thank you, the crown whispered directly into his mind. Tobias kicked the disruptor away and turned to find Ashara. She stood amid a circle of bodies, breathing hard, her armor cracked and bloodied. But she was alive, and her eyes found his. The main doors exploded inward. Lieutenant Saren led the charge, loyal soldiers flooding the space. The remaining enforcers threw down weapons. Saren approached, weapon raised, taking in the carnage. High Counselor, Saren said flatly, you're under arrest for treason. Vorian laughed, the sound wet. You think this changes anything? The other council members will never accept him. They'll tear the Empire apart, rather than bow to a human. Then they can join you in a cell, Ashara said, crossing to Tobias. Her hands found his face, checking for injury. You're bleeding. Flesh wound. There's no such thing. Despite everything, Tobias smiled. You better. Saren cleared their throat, and Ashara stepped back, professional distance reasserting, but her hand lingered on his arm. Your Majesty, Saren said. The palace is secure. Most of Vorian's forces surrendered, but the other High Council members fled the capital. Let them run, Tobias said. The crown pulsed, feeding him information about safe houses, every place traitors might hide. We'll deal with them later. Right now I need to address the Empire. You're injured, Ashara started. I'm Emperor. Bleeding is apparently part of the job. He moved to the throne, and the crown seemed to hum with approval. When he sat, the obsidian felt warm, molding to his body. The crown's presence expanded, and suddenly he could feel the Empire. Every colony, every ship, every citizen connected through the ancient network. Open a channel, he ordered, Empire-wide broadcast. Within minutes, Tobias was staring into a camera drone, knowing billions of beings across 40 systems were about to see their new emperor. My name is Tobias Grant, he began. 4 months ago, I was human. I'm still human, but I'm also your emperor, chosen by the crown that has guided this empire for 3 millennia. Tonight, Members of the High Council attempted to destroy the crown rather than accept its choice. They failed, but their betrayal reveals a truth. This empire has been failing for generations, not because of weak rulers, but because it became rigid, trapped in traditions that no longer serve its people. Ashara stood to his right, and he could feel her attention, could sense through their bond that she was holding her breath. The crown chose me because I'm not Zorathian, because I see your civilization with fresh eyes, because I can ask questions you've forgotten to ask. Why do some colonies pay triple taxes? Why does the military conscript from poor worlds while the wealthy buy exemptions? Why has technological innovation stagnated? He felt the crown feeding him more. I don't have all the answers yet, but I will find them, and I will fix what's broken, even if it means dismantling systems that have stood for centuries. The crown chose me for this purpose. It chose change over continuity. His eyes found Ashara's, and he made his next words a promise to her as much as to the empire. I didn't ask for this throne. I didn't want it. But I'll be damned if I let this empire tear itself apart, because some people can't accept that leadership comes from merit, not bloodline. The crown sees worth, and it sees a future where this empire thrives. He stood, and the crown blazed. To those who would challenge my rule, I welcome it. Come before me, make your case, but know that I will defend this empire and its people with everything I have. And to those loyal citizens watching, human, Zorathian, or any of the 100 species that call this empire home, I make you this oath. I will be the emperor you deserve, even if I have to learn how along the way. The broadcast ended. Silence filled the throne room, and then Saren began a slow clap. Other soldiers joined in, the sound building until it echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Tobias sat back down, suddenly exhausted. Adrenaline was wearing off, and his wounded side throbbed. Ashara was beside him instantly, medical kit already open. That was a good speech, she said quietly, cutting away damaged gear. Think it'll work? I don't know, but it was better than any speech a Zorathian emperor would have given. You sounded real. Her hands worked efficiently, sealing the wound, but her touch lingered longer than necessary, and Tobias caught her wrist. What happens now, he asked, between us? Ashara glanced around the throne room, at Saren directing cleanup, at soldiers securing prisoners, at the countless eyes that would forever be watching them. Now you become emperor, properly. There will be ceremonies, political marriages proposed, alliances to forge. That's not what I asked. She pulled her hand free, but her expression softened. I'm your commander, your guard. Anything else would be complicated. I know. It's more than complicated. I'm the one who enslaved you. Figure it out, Tobias said. Together. That's how. Ashara looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the war behind her eyes, duty versus desire. The empire comes first, she finally said. And I'm staying as your guard. Someone needs to keep you from getting killed. Also agreed. But when the dust settles... She trailed off, something vulnerable crossing her face. Ask me again. When you're not bleeding and I'm not covered in traitor's blood, ask me if this is real. And you'll answer? I'll answer. It wasn't a promise, not exactly, but it was enough. The next hours blurred. Reports, arrests, emergency sessions. Tobias appointed Brecken as interim chancellor. The steward had proven his loyalty by feeding Saren information about Vorian's movements. The remaining High Council members were hunted down, and those who hadn't actively participated were given a choice: swear loyalty or resign. Most resigned. Tobias let them go. You're being too merciful, Ashara argued during a brief respite in his chambers. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky amber. They'll scheme against you. Probably, but I'd rather have them scheming outside than martyrs inspiring rebellion inside. That's not how Zorathian politics works. Good, maybe it's time for a new approach. She smiled despite herself, settling into a chair across from him. They were alone for the first time since the kiss, and the space between them felt charged. You're going to change everything, she said quietly. That's the idea. The Empire won't like it. The Empire can learn to adjust. I did. Ashara's smile faded and she leaned forward. I need to say something about what I did. I know why you did it, Tobias interrupted. The crown's shown me everything. The visions, the weight you carried, the impossible choice you faced. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it understandable, and more than that, he paused, it makes you the only person in this entire empire I can actually trust. Her head jerked up, eyes wide. How can you possibly? Because you had nothing to gain. You gambled your honor, your career, everything on a vision that could have been wrong. You could have brought me here and watched the crown reject me, and then you'd have been executed. He held her gaze. That's not someone playing political games. That's desperation from someone trying to save her people. Ashara's throat worked, and her eyes glistened. I watched your colleagues die in that raid. Stop. Tobias crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. What's done is done. We can't change it, but we can make sure it meant something, that all those deaths actually saved the empire you were trying to protect. A tear tracked down her green cheek, and Tobias caught it with his thumb. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she whispered. You don't get to decide what you deserve. I do, and I say we move forward. Together? If you want that. Ashara's hand covered his, pressing his palm against her face. I want that. I've wanted that since I saw you in the visions. She pulled him into a fierce embrace. Tobias wrapped his arms around her, feeling her strength, her heat, the rapid beat of her heart. The crown pulsed, and through their bond, he felt her emotions. Relief, hope, love tangled with guilt and fear. We'll figure this out, he murmured into her hair. Whatever this is, we'll make it work. Emperors don't marry their guards. Then I'll promote you. Empress. She pulled back, eyes searching his face. You can't be serious. The crown chose me for a reason. It chose us. I can feel it through the bond. This was always the plan. Not one ruler, but two. Different perspectives, different strengths, balanced. The Empire will never accept. The Empire will accept what I tell them to accept. I'm Emperor, remember? You've been Emperor for less than a day. Longest day of my life. Ashara cupped his face, her expression softening into something tender. You're absolutely insane. Probably, but I'm your kind of insane. She kissed him then, soft and slow, and it felt like sealing a pact. When they broke apart, the sun had fully risen, gilding the city in gold light. There's going to be so much work, Ashara said. Reforming the government, rebuilding trust, managing the colonies. We'll handle it. Assassination attempts. You'll keep me alive. Political scandals. We'll weather them. She smiled against his lips. You know what you're signing up for? Not even a little bit, but I'm learning. They stayed like that as the Empire woke around them, a human emperor and his alien commander, chosen by an ancient crown facing an uncertain future. It wasn't the story either would have written, but it was theirs, and they would make it work. Because the crown had seen something in both of them, not perfection, but potential. Not what they were, but what they could become together. 3 months later, Tobias stood before the assembled empire, Ashara at his side wearing the circlet that marked her as empress. The reforms had begun. Tax restructuring, military conscription revision, technology investment. It was messy work, and half the empire still questioned his legitimacy. But the other half was thriving. Colonial worlds reported increased satisfaction, human refugees had been granted citizenship, and the economy showed signs of recovery. Change was happening. Ready? Ashara asked, her hand finding his. Tobias looked at the woman who'd enslaved him and become his partner, his equal, his love. The crown pulsed contentedly on his head, satisfied with its choice. With you, always. They stepped forward to address their empire, and the crown blazed with light that promised a new era. Not the age of tradition and stagnation that had come before, but something unprecedented. The age of the human emperor and his alien empress, who had learned that sometimes the greatest strength came from the most unexpected sources. The crown had known, it always had.